Hello, brother. How's your day today? If possible, please let me know where you are on Earth. As for me, my day was quite boring. Let me share it with you. Today at school, I had a bit of a debate with my classmates on the following topics: physics, geography, science, history, politics, astronomy, controversial theories. The question here is, why does the Bermuda Triangle continue to be an enigma for NASA and other scientific communities? And I will share my personal views. Let's analyze it together. Imagine for a moment you are a pilot. The year is 1945. You are flying a patrol mission flight 19 over a calm blue sea. The sun glints off the waves, and a gentle breeze pushes your Avenger torpedo bomber along. There are 4 other planes in your formation, each a mirror of your own, a perfect, synchronized ballet in the sky. It's a routine training mission out of Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale. This is a known flight path, a simple exercise, the kind of thing you've done 100 times before. You glance at your co-pilot, a young man who trusts you implicitly, and you feel the reassuring hum of the engines. Everything is by the book. Everything is normal. But then, your compass begins to spin. It's not a slow, deliberate turn, but a frantic, chaotic dance. Your co-pilot points to his own compass, and it's doing the same thing. You contact your commander, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, and his voice crackles through the radio, strained with confusion. "Both my compasses are out," he says. "I'm trying to find Fort Lauderdale. I don't know where we are. Must have got lost after the last turn." He is a seasoned pilot, and his calm facade is cracking. You hear the fear in his voice, the gnawing anxiety that comes from a loss of control. It's a fear not of the machine, but of the unseen, the unknown. The kind of fear that reminds you of your own fragile mortality. This isn't just a navigation error. It's a profound psychological unraveling. One minute you are a master of the sky with the laws of physics and the known world at your command. The next, those same laws have betrayed you, leaving you adrift in a sea that has suddenly become something alien and hostile. The psychological impact of this isn't just disorientation. It's a profound sense of helplessness. It's the feeling that the very ground beneath your feet are, in this case, the sky above your head's no longer real. It's the creeping realization that the maps you trust, the instruments you rely on, are all just human constructs. In the face of a true mystery, they are useless. After this video, you'll never look at the world the same way, for the tension gets too high. Take a moment to like the episode and subscribe button. Only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you are in the world and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, prepare yourself, and let's unravel this hidden truth together. This vanishing act, now known as the Lost Patrol, is a perfect storm of unsettling details. The patrol consisted of 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers. They were all state-of-the-art aircraft for their time, maintained meticulously. But their disappearance wasn't just sudden. It was preceded by a series of increasingly bizarre radio transmissions from the flight leader, Lieutenant Taylor. He was a decorated pilot, an instructor. He was the kind of man who should never have been lost on a routine flight. He reported that his compasses were malfunctioning and that the sea below him looked strange. He couldn't distinguish between the Florida Keys and the Bahamas. This is a crucial detail. Seasoned pilot would never confuse these landmarks, even under duress. His transmissions became more frantic, more disjointed. You can hear the confusion, the panic, the desperation of a man whose entire worldview is collapsing around him. A verifiable historical fact about this event is that the Navy's official investigation report initially stated that the cause of the disaster was cause unknown. However, in a later declassified version, they changed this to blame the flight leader for pilot error. This is a classic example of classified historical information being manipulated to create a simpler, more palatable public narrative. It's a psychological tactic to regain control of a narrative that has spiraled into public fear. When a government institution can't explain something, they often resort to blaming the one person who can no longer defend themselves. The bizarre detail here is that the search and rescue aircraft sent to find them, a PBM Mariner seaplane, also vanished without a trace. Almost as if the area itself was consuming anything that came near it. This created a double-layered mystery, a psychological puzzle that doubled the fear and the fascination. It's a pattern you'll see again and again. The more we try to investigate, the deeper the mystery seems to become. But the real question remained: what could have been so powerful, so disruptive? that it could disable the instruments of not one, but 6 separate aircraft in the same small area. The chilling tale of Flight 19 is just one chapter in a much larger, more enigmatic book. Not long after, in 1948, the Star Tiger, a Ferengian tutor for passenger aircraft, vanished on a flight from the Azores to Bermuda. Aboard were 25 passengers and 6 crew. The final transmission from the pilot, Captain David Colby, was a perfectly routine position report. He stated they were on course and expected to arrive on time. There was no distress call, no sign of mechanical failure, not even a hint of the chaos that enveloped Flight 19. It simply ceased to exist. When you look at the facts from a psychological perspective, this is almost more terrifying than a panicked plea for help. Panic plea at least confirms that something happened. The utter silence suggests a phenomenon so sudden and so complete that there was no time for a final word, no chance for a final human connection. It speaks to a kind of clean surgical removal from reality, but a deeper dive into the historical archives reveals a strange, unsettling detail. The Star Tiger's sister ship, the Star Ariel, also a Tudor IV, would vanish a year later on a flight from Bermuda to Kingston, Jamaica. The two disappearances are separated by both time and space, yet they share a bizarre, almost identical pattern. Both aircraft were Tudor IVs, a notoriously difficult plane to fly, prone to navigational issues. They were part of an airline, British South American Airways, which itself had a troubled history of accidents. 8. This leads you to question whether the true mystery isn't a supernatural force at all, but rather a more mundane and sinister one, a flaw in the aircraft's design, perhaps compounded by human error or even something more deliberate. A verifiable historical fact is that the official investigation into the Star Tiger's disappearance revealed that its radio direction finder had a known issue which could have been a factor in a navigational error. Gosh, it's a small technical detail, but one that adds a layer of unnerving possibility to the story. The truly bizarre detail, however, comes from a separate but related incident. A quirky, lesser-known detail about historical organizations with limited public records is found in the archives of a group that studied celestial navigation and atmospheric anomalies in the mid-20th century. These documents, while not classified in the traditional sense, were buried under layers of mundane bureaucratic records. They contain a series of notes on a magnetic field fluctuation event that was detected off the coast of Florida just weeks before Flight 19's disappearance. The notes mention a specific coded name, Project Cerberus. There's no further information on what this project was, but the fact that an internal group was tracking an unexplained magnetic event in the exact area and time frame of these disappearances is a tantalizing breadcrumb. It raises a question. Were these incidents a result of natural phenomena, or were they perhaps a side effect of some unrecorded clandestine human experiment? This brings us to the core of the psychological analysis. The human need to find a pattern, even when there isn't one. The Bermuda Triangle narrative has become so powerful because it takes a series of disparate, tragic events and links them with a common, mysterious thread. It's a way for our minds to impose order on chaos. We prefer a grand, inexplicable mystery over the cold, hard reality of human fallibility, mechanical failure, or just plain old-fashioned bad luck. The idea of a malevolent force is almost more comforting than the thought that we are simply not in control, that the universe is indifferent to our existence. The fact that the disappearances of Flight 19 and the Star Tiger were both deemed as cause unknown by official bodies initially fueled the narrative that there was a force beyond human understanding at play. But the real question remained: why did the investigative reports later shift to blaming the pilots? A move that only added to the mystery for those who understood the full context of the events. The compass that lied us small. Seemingly mundane details, perhaps the most psychologically profound aspect of these mysteries. You are on the bridge of a ship, the SS Marine Sulphur Queen, a massive vessel designed to transport molten sulfur. It's February 1963, and the ship has just passed through the Florida Straits, heading north. You look at the compass, a solid, reliable instrument, the very definition of a steadfast guide. But it's not pointing north, it's oscillating wildly, its needle a frenetic blur. You consult the backup compass, and it's doing the same thing. Then you check the celestial navigation charts, but the stars seem to have shifted. Your position's subtly, maddeningly wrong. Your mind screams for an explanation. Is it a magnetic anomaly? Is it a fault with the ship's wiring? Or is it something far more unsettling? The feeling of losing your bearings, of having the very laws of physics you rely on suddenly rendered moot, is a uniquely human fear. It attacks our core sense of security and control. A verifiable historical fact about the SS Marine Sulphur Queen is that its final, cryptic message, sent on February 4, 1963, was a simple weather report. The ship stated it was in good condition and the weather was fair and clear. This is the psychological equivalent of a horror movie where the victim says, "I'm just going to check on that strange noise in the basement," right before they vanish. The mundane nature of the last communication is what makes it so terrifying. It suggests that whatever happened was so instantaneous, so cataclysmic, that there was no time for a distress call. It's the chilling silence that follows the calm. The bizarre detail here, though, is the pattern of magnetic anomalies. A quirky detail from the archives of the U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey, a historical organization with limited public records, reveals that the area now known as the Bermuda Triangle has historically been a hotbed of unpredictable magnetic compass variations. These anomalies, recorded as early as the 1800s, were often dismissed as simple instrument quirks. Yet, a closer look at the data shows that the fluctuations were not random. They seem to follow a pattern that coincided with other unexplainable atmospheric events. It's a fact that suggests these forces have always been there, just waiting for the right moment to claim another victim. But what if the compasses weren't lying at all? What if they were simply reacting to a force that we, with our limited understanding of physics, simply cannot comprehend? What if the magnetic anomalies were not an error, but a signal? This brings us to a psychological analysis of our own perception. We are creatures of habit and order. We build our world on predictable laws: gravity, magnetism, time. When one of those laws breaks, even for a moment, our entire psychological framework is shattered. The compass that lies isn't just a broken instrument. It's a profound betrayal of the known world. It forces you to confront a terrible truth: that your perception of reality may be flawed, that the very instruments you use to navigate the world may not be trustworthy. But the real question remained: were these compass failures a symptom of a larger unseen force at play? Or were they merely the first sign of a chain of human and mechanical failures masked by the profound nature of the final disappearance? The psychological terror of these disappearances is not just in the vanishing itself, but in the echoes of the human response. You are a member of the search and rescue team dispatched to find Flight 19. It's December 5th, 1945, and you are on a massive PBM Mariner seaplane, a flying boat designed for long-range patrols. Your mission is simple: fly to the last known position of Flight 19 and bring them home. You scan the choppy waves below, your eyes straining against the setting sun. But as you fly closer to the coordinates, your own radio begins to crackle with an unnatural static. You hear faint, distorted voices, but they are not the voices of the missing pilots. It's a jumble of what sounds like panicked transmissions, but they're not on your frequency, and they're not from your era. It's a disembodied chorus of fear, a haunting premonition of your own fate. The psychological phenomenon of this isn't just about what you see or hear, but what your mind does to fill in the gaps. It takes the unexplainable and transforms it into something supernatural. A psychological defense mechanism against the terrifying prospect of a world without rules. A verifiable historical fact about this search and rescue mission is that the PBM Mariner, known as Flight 49, was officially reported to have exploded in midair. The official Navy report claimed a witness on a nearby vessel saw a sudden flash of light in the sky. However, the subsequent investigation could never find any definitive wreckage, a very bizarre detail given the size of the aircraft. This is an instance of classified historical information being presented as a simple mechanical failure, when the physical evidence, or lack thereof, suggests a far more complex and unsettling truth. The explosion theory provides a clean, logical narrative for a public desperate for answers. It allows the institution to close the book on the incident without having to confront the deeper, more unsettling questions. The truly bizarre detail, however, is a quirk found in the logbooks of a historical organization with limited public records up. team of meteorologists who were tracking an unprecedented fast-moving squall line off the coast of Florida on that very night. Their notes contain a cryptic entry, a single line: atmospheric disturbance readings spiking off the charts, like nothing we've ever seen. EM field is off the scale. Codename Kraken again. A mysterious codename, a signal of something known but not publicly acknowledged. This suggests that the authorities were not only aware of a major atmospheric event, but that it was so unusual it merited its own classified designation. This raises the question: was the PBM Mariner's disappearance a result of a freak explosion? Or was it a victim of this same force that claimed the planes of Flight 19, a force so powerful it could disintegrate a plane and its crew without a trace? The psychological aspect of this is the concept of a doomed mission. Once one tragedy strikes, the next one is often viewed through the same lens of fatalism. The disappearance of the PBM Mariner cemented the Bermuda Triangle as a cursed place in the public imagination. It became more than just a site of a few disappearances. It became a malevolent entity, a graveyard that consumed all who dared to enter. This belief, born out of a profound inability to explain the events, is a psychological coping mechanism. It's easier to believe in a devil than to believe in an indifferent universe. But the real question remained: why did the Navy's official report so quickly settle on an explosion theory without a shred of physical evidence? And what was the true nature of the Kraken event that was so important it was logged by a secret team of meteorologists? The disappearance of the USS Cyclops is not just a historical mystery. It's a chilling psychological portrait of institutional denial and the fear of the unknown. You are a member of the U.S. Navy's Inquiry Board. In 1918, the USS Cyclops, a massive collier ship, has vanished with its 306 crew and passengers, including the American Consul General to Brazil. The ship was last seen sailing from Barbados and simply disappeared. No wreckage, no distress call, not a single lifeboat found. The official naval history records this as the single largest non-combat loss of life in U.S. naval history. The sheer scale of the disappearance is what makes it so terrifying. It's a psychological blow to the national psyche symbol of military might. A ship that was supposed to be invincible, simply ceasing to exist. This incident shatters the illusion of human control and competence. A verifiable historical fact about the USS Cyclops is that President Woodrow Wilson himself launched a formal inquiry into its disappearance. He later stated, "Only God and the sea know what happened to the great ship." This public admission of helplessness from the highest office is a powerful psychological signal. It tells the public that the government, the institution designed to protect them, is just as baffled and powerless as they are. This is a very different response than the one to Flight 19, where the narrative was later controlled. Here, the sheer scale of the loss forced a different kind of honesty, one that ultimately fed the mystery rather than solved it. The bizarre detail, however, lies in the secret internal naval archives. Buried within a set of documents labeled Anomalous Naval Events, you find a file dedicated to the USS Cyclops. The file contains a report from a historical organization with limited public records as small. It's a secretive intelligence unit known as the Office of Unconventional Threats. This report reveals a shocking, previously unreleased piece of information. The report notes that the captain of the Cyclops, a man named George Worley, was of German descent and had made a series of bizarre and disloyal comments prior to the ship's departure. The report speculates that the ship was a victim of German sabotage, or a clandestine plot orchestrated by a historical organization with limited public records. German spy ring. It's a paranoid and unsettling detail that reveals the psychological backdrop of the time. A world consumed by war, where every enemy action, no matter how remote, was seen as a potential cause. The psychological analysis here is one of transference. When a mystery is too big and too terrifying to comprehend, we often project a known enemy onto it. It's easier to believe that the USS Cyclops was destroyed by a German submarine intangible human threat than to accept the possibility that it was swallowed by an unexplainable force. This allows us to reframe the tragedy as a consequence of war, something we can understand and process, rather than a cosmic puzzle that defies all logic. But the real question remained: if the naval intelligence had credible suspicions of sabotage, why was this information never released to the public? And why did they allow the disappearance to become one of the most enduring mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle? The psychological weight of a vanished ship, particularly one with a distinct and unusual cargo, is a powerful driver of speculation. You are a maritime investigator, looking at the case of the SS Sulphur Queen again, but this time, you are also examining the fate of its sister ship, the SS Marine Electric. Both were built for the same purpose. Both had a similar design, and both were carrying a cargo of molten sulfur. The SS Marine Electric sank in 1983 off the coast of Virginia, but its disappearance, unlike its sisters, was not a complete mystery. There were survivors who testified to a sudden, catastrophic structural failure. But what if their cargo was the common thread? What if it wasn't a supernatural force, but the very nature of their mission that made them vulnerable? This line of thinking shifts the psychological narrative from one of cosmic fate to one of human arrogance and oversight. It's a move from fear of the unknown to the fear of a preventable tragedy, a far more unsettling thought for many people. A verifiable historical fact about the SS Marine Sulphur Queen is that a Coast Guard investigation revealed the ship had been operating with known structural deficiencies and was long overdue for maintenance. This fact, while mundane, is a critical piece of the puzzle. It takes the mystery from the realm of the paranormal and grounds it in the cold, hard reality of human negligence. The psychological insight here is that we often prefer to believe in a grand, dramatic mystery rather than confront the less romantic but more terrifying possibility that these tragedies were caused by the simple, cumulative failures of institutions and individuals. The bizarre detail here is a peculiar pattern found in the cargo manifests of several vanished ships in the Bermuda Triangle. A historical organization with limited public records, a team of oceanographic analysts working for a private shipping consortium noted in their internal reports the correlation between the disappearance of vessels and the transport of specific dense ores or chemicals. They theorized that certain cargoes, particularly those that can become unstable or emit gases under specific conditions, might be a trigger for localized, unexplainable atmospheric events. These reports, labeled Project Chimera, were shelved and dismissed as unsubstantiated, but they raise a fascinating and unsettling question. What if the ships themselves, or more specifically, their cargo, were the cause of their own demise? The deeper question is not just why the ships vanished, but why we, as a species, are so quick to dismiss the mundane, verifiable facts in favor of a more elaborate, mysterious narrative. The disappearances of ships like the SS Marine Sulphur Queen and its sister ship, with their shared cargo and structural issues, provide a powerful case study in the psychology of mystery-making. We take a series of preventable tragedies and transform them into a grand, unsolvable riddle. But the real question remained: why did the official investigations into these disappearances so often fail to connect the dots between the cargo, the structural flaws, and the final moments of the ships? And what was the true nature of the Project Chimera that was studying this exact phenomenon? The psychological unraveling of a crew in a crisis is a terrifying thing to witness, especially when it is documented in real time. You are listening to a declassified audio recording from a U.S. Navy destroyer in 1968, which was dispatched to investigate the disappearance of the USS Scorpion, a nuclear submarine that vanished in the Atlantic. The audio isn't from the Scorpion itself, but from a nearby vessel that was tracking a series of unexplainable sonar pings. The pings were not mechanical. They were a rhythmic, almost deliberate tapping, unlike anything the crew had ever heard. The men on the destroyer, trained to be calm and professional, begin to speculate in hushed tones. Their logical minds, built on the principles of physics and engineering, are failing them. They start to whisper about ancient sea monsters and alien craft. It's a psychological case study in how a lack of information can be more damaging than a known threat. How the mind will invent a monster to fill the void of the unknown. A verifiable historical fact about the USS Scorpion is that a U.S. Navy report concluded the submarine was lost due to a catastrophic internal event, likely a torpedo malfunction. This official story, however, has been challenged for decades by naval historians and former submariners, who point to a series of mechanical problems and a rushed maintenance schedule. This is a crucial point of analysis. The institution provides a convenient, if not entirely convincing, explanation to quell public fear.
While the subtle contradictions and ignored details persist in the historical record, fueling the narrative of a deeper mystery.
The public is given a story, not the truth. The bizarre detail in this case comes from a source that is often overlooked: the private correspondence of military families. Collection of letters from the wife of a high-ranking naval officer, now part of an unofficial historical organization with limited public records, reveals her husband's concern about a toxic command culture aboard the Scorpion. The letters describe a Captain Francis Slattery, who is known for his unorthodox and often dangerous maneuvers, and a crew that was growing increasingly resentful and fearful. One letter mentions a strange detail, a recurring in-joke among the crew about a sea witch who cursed the ship. This isn't just superstition, it's a psychological projection of a crew's fear onto a mythical figure. It's a way of externalizing their genuine anxiety about their command and their mission. This brings us to the core psychological puzzle of the Bermuda Triangle, the role of internal conflict and command dynamics in a crisis. When a crew is not unified, when there is fear and distrust simmering beneath the surface, their ability to respond to a genuine crisis is severely compromised. A mechanical failure, a navigation error, or a sudden storm that might have been manageable for a cohesive team could become a death sentence for a fragmented one. The final garbled transmissions from the USS Scorpion and other lost vessels, when analyzed through this lens, might not be about an external force at all, but a final desperate cry of a crew whose human dynamics had already broken down. But the real question remained: was the torpedo malfunction the true cause of the submarine's demise? Or was it the culmination of a series of ignored warnings and a breakdown in human trust, a more unsettling truth than any supernatural explanation? The Tudor air crash, specifically the disappearance of the Star Tiger in 1948, presents a classic case study of how an escalating weather system can interact with human panic to create a perfect storm of tragedy. You are a meteorologist in London, a decade after the fact, reviewing the original weather charts from that night. You see a seemingly innocuous low-pressure system, but as you dig deeper you find a series of rapid, unpredictable shifts in wind speed and direction, something that would have been impossible to predict with the technology of the time. This is a crucial point of analysis. What we might now call a routine weather event was, for the crew of the Tudor, a malevolent force of nature, a psychological assault on their sense of control. The final radio message from Captain David Colby, ETA Bermuda, 0500. On course and in good order, is a chilling example of a man clinging to the illusion of control as a far more powerful, unseen force closes in around him. A verifiable historical fact about the Star Tiger is that its final routine message was received by a radio station in Bermuda, which acknowledged it and then logged no further communication. The silence that followed is the very definition of eerie. There was no distress call, no frantic plea, just a sudden, complete cessation of all contact. This silence is what elevates the story from a simple accident to a historical mystery. It suggests a cataclysmic event so fast that it outpaced the human ability to even react. It's a psychological shock to the system, the realization that technology, no matter how advanced, can be rendered useless in an instant. The bizarre detail, however, is a quirky note found in the logbooks of a historical organization with limited public records. A team of British naval intelligence officers who were secretly tracking a series of post-war meteorological balloons. Their notes from that night contain a perplexing entry: a balloon, launched from a remote facility in the Caribbean, registered a series of anomalous magnetic spikes and unusual atmospheric pressure drops in the same area and time frame as the Star Tiger's disappearance. The report concludes with a cryptic handwritten note, possible link to Project Siren. This is an unsettling piece of the puzzle, suggesting that a secretive human experiment or surveillance operation might have been a contributing factor, or perhaps even the cause of the atmospheric disturbance that led to the plane's demise. This brings us to the psychological core of this event, the tension between natural and man-made explanations. We want to believe that the Tudor air crash was the result of a single, understandable cause, whether it's pilot error, mechanical failure, or a freak storm. But the existence of a secret project tracking atmospheric anomalies in the exact same area forces us to confront a more complex and disturbing possibility. Was the storm just a storm, or was it a side effect of a different, more secretive human action? But the real question remained. Why would a government agency be secretly tracking atmospheric anomalies in that specific region? And what was the true nature of Project Siren? A detail that suggests a deeper, more intentional level of classified historical information. The psychological horror of Flight 19's disappearance is anchored in a detail that is often overlooked: the navigator's miscalculation. You are a flight simulator operator analyzing the final moments of Flight 19. You see Lieutenant Charles Taylor, the flight leader, a man whose entire career was built on precision and control. He's making a series of decisions that appear to be fundamentally wrong. He is certain he is over the Florida Keys and is telling his squadron to turn north, away from land, believing they are flying over the Gulf of Mexico. The other pilots, less experienced, are putting their lives in his hands. You can feel the tension in the cockpit, the quiet dread as they follow his command, even as their own instruments and their own instincts tell them he is wrong. This is the profound psychological terror of being lost, of a leader who is supposed to be your anchor becoming the source of your doom. It's a fundamental breakdown of trust in a high-stakes environment. A verifiable historical fact is that Lieutenant Taylor's family insisted for years that he was not at fault. Their pushback against the official Navy report was so strong that they eventually forced the Navy to change the official cause from pilot error to cause unknown. This is a profound example of the human need to protect a legacy, to rewrite history, to absolve a loved one of a profound and fatal mistake. This psychological drive to find a more noble or mysterious cause for a tragedy is a powerful force in the shaping of historical narratives. The bizarre detail here is a quirky note found in a historical organization with limited public records, a collection of letters from an anonymous Navy psychotherapist who worked with the families of the Flight 19 crew. The letters describe a deep, unsettling fear among the families that their loved ones had not simply crashed, but had been taken. The therapist's notes mention a recurring dream reported by several family members, a dream of a large, dark shadow moving across the water, a silent predator hunting the planes from below. This isn't a verifiable fact, but a psychological artifact, a collective hallucination born from a shared trauma. It reveals how the human mind, when faced with an incomprehensible event, will often retreat into the realm of shared myth and superstition to find comfort. It's a terrifying example of the human capacity for collective delusion. This brings us to the core of the human psyche in the face of the Bermuda Triangle mysteries. The fear is not just about the unknown, but about the terrifying possibility of being truly and utterly alone, with no one to guide you. When your leader is lost, when your instruments are lying, and when the landscape below you is unrecognizable, the human mind will begin to search for a reason, a pattern, a meaning, even if it has to invent one. But the real question remained: was Lieutenant Taylor's fatal miscalculation a moment of pure disorientation? Or was he reacting to an unseen force that was actively manipulating his perceptions? It's a more chilling possibility that the Navy was unwilling to explore. The theory of accidental sabotage is a particularly unsettling path to walk, as it takes the mystery from the realm of the paranormal and places it squarely in the cold, hard reality of human deception and internal conflict. You are a journalist poring over the declassified documents of British South American Airways, BSAA, the airline that operated the vanished Star Tiger and Star Ariel. You discover a string of internal memos detailing not just mechanical issues, but also labor disputes and a series of unexplained maintenance failures that plagued the company in the years leading up to the disappearances. This is a crucial, verifiable fact. BSAA had a reputation for cutting corners, and its safety record was far from stellar. Psychologically, this shifts the focus from a cosmic mystery to a more mundane, but no less terrifying, truth that these deaths may have been entirely preventable. It's a truth that institutional forces often work to bury, as it implies culpability and opens the door to lawsuits and public outrage. The bizarre detail here is a quirky find in the files of a historical organization with limited public records, a London-based insurance firm. Their internal risk assessment reports for BSAA contain a cryptic, handwritten notation: high risk of insider interference. Possible link to a historical organization with limited public records, post-war intelligence group. The report theorizes that a disgruntled employee or a rival company, disguised as a disgruntled employee, could have deliberately tampered with the aircraft, This is a far cry from a supernatural vortex, but it's a deeply unsettling possibility, as it suggests a cold, calculated act of malice rather than a chaotic natural event. It raises the specter of a human enemy, one that is far more unpredictable and malevolent than any storm or magnetic anomaly. This leads us to a psychological observation about power dynamics and deception. When a major corporation or government institution is faced with a catastrophic failure, they often have a vested interest in promoting a narrative of mystery rather than negligence. A mystery can be an act of God, a force of nature, or a historical enigma. Negligence is a failure of leadership, a moral and ethical collapse. The Bermuda Triangle narrative, therefore, served a purpose for the institutions involved. It allowed them to deflect blame and avoid accountability. It's a classic case of creating an unexplored perspective to obscure a hidden truth. But the real question remained. If there was credible evidence of sabotage or negligence, why were these disappearances? It's allowed to become one of the world's most enduring mysteries. And what was the true nature of the outsider interference that was so compelling to a major insurance firm? The disappearance of the Bermuda DC-3 in 1948 on a flight from San Juan to Miami is a psychological case study in the power of a single, unexplainable detail to transform a tragedy into a legend. You are a civilian pilot, listening to the radio chatter as the flight proceeds. The final transmission from the pilot, Captain Bob Lindquist, is a simple position report. We are 50 miles south of Miami. Everything is fine. Should see the lights of Miami soon. Then silence. Not static, not a distress call, just a clean, sudden cut. The DC-3 was a reliable workhorse of the air, and for it to vanish so completely, so close to its destination, defied all logical explanation. It's a deeply unsettling thought that you can do everything right. You can be just minutes from safety, and a force you don't even know exists can still claim you. This shatters the human illusion of proximity as a form of safety. A verifiable historical fact about the Bermuda DC-3 is that a subsequent search found absolutely no debris, no oil slick, and no sign of the 32 people on board. This is a crucial detail, for it pushes the mystery beyond simple mechanical failure. A plane crash, even a catastrophic one, leaves behind a physical signature. The complete absence of wreckage suggests a more profound disappearance, a literal vanishing. It's the psychological equivalent of an empty crime scene. The lack of evidence creates a void that our minds rush to fill with the most extraordinary possibilities. The bizarre detail here is a quirky find in the logbooks of a historical organization with limited public records. A private aeronautical engineering firm that had been tasked with reviewing the DC-3's flight path. The report contains a cryptic note about a pre-flight inspection. It mentions that the flight engineer had noticed a peculiar, rapid oscillation in the compass on the ground before takeoff, and had dismissed it as a simple glitch. This is a profoundly unsettling detail. It suggests a pre-existing condition, a subtle warning that went unheeded. It's a psychological snapshot of human denial, the tendency to dismiss a small red flag when everything else seems normal. It's easier to believe in a glitch than to accept that something is fundamentally wrong with the instruments you depend on for your life. This brings us to the psychological core of the Bermuda Triangle narrative. The way we interpret information. We see a series of tragic events and then go back to look for patterns, sometimes finding them in small, seemingly insignificant details. The DC-3's compass oscillation, which was dismissed at the time, becomes a key piece of the puzzle in retrospect. But the real question remained, was the compass glitch a random anomaly, or was it an early warning sign of a pre-existing, perhaps still unexplained, atmospheric condition that would ultimately lead to the plane's disappearance just hours later? The disappearance of the SS Marine Sulphur Queen is a mystery rooted not in a supernatural event, but in the subtle, unsettling details of a ship's construction and its cargo. You are a journalist poring over the official Coast Guard records, and you discover a damning fact. The ship was converted from an oil tanker to a carrier of molten sulfur, and the conversion was done in a way that left it structurally compromised. The ship was essentially a time bomb, a floating junk heap, just waiting for the right conditions to fall apart. This is a crucial, verifiable fact that the official narrative of a disappearance conveniently glossed over. The psychological horror here is that the mystery wasn't an act of God, but a man-made tragedy, a slow-motion disaster waiting to happen. It forces you to question whether any of these mysteries are truly mysteries at all. just a series of preventable human failures dressed up in the cloak of the unknown. A bizarre detail, however, comes from a historical organization with limited public records, a private shipping insurance company ES's internal investigation into the loss of the vessel. The report, filed by a team of risk assessors, notes that the Marine Sulphur Queen had been subject to an unusually high number of low-level internal safety complaints in the months leading up to its disappearance. The report goes on to say that these complaints were not about the ship's age or its cargo, but about a strange rhythmic vibration that was reportedly felt throughout the ship, vibration that had no mechanical origin. The report concluded that the vibration was a symptom of a deeper, unknown phenomenon and was labeled with a cryptic code, Project Tremor. This detail pushes the narrative back towards the unexplained, suggesting that the ship's structural failure might have been accelerated or even caused by an external force that was actively affecting its integrity. This brings us to a psychological analysis of how we process information and assign blame. We prefer to externalize our fears, to blame a mysterious force in the Bermuda Triangle rather than confront the terrifying reality of institutional negligence. It's a psychological defense mechanism. It's easier to believe in a phantom menace than in a slow, grinding failure of oversight and accountability. The fact that the Coast Guard report highlighted the structural flaws, while a private insurance report hinted at a more mysterious external force, is a perfect example of this cognitive dissonance. But the real question remained: was the Marine Sulphur Queen's demise a direct result of its structural flaws? Or were those flaws simply a weak point exploited by a far more powerful, unseen force that was actively affecting the integrity of the ship, as hinted at in the private insurance report? The psychological denial of a slow-moving disaster is a powerful and unsettling phenomenon. You are a sailor aboard the SS Marine Sulphur Queen in the hours before it vanishes. The molten sulfur, heated to over 275 degrees Fahrenheit, is bubbling and shifting in its cargo hold, its movement causing the very structure of the ship to flex and groan. You smell the telltale scent of sulfur dioxide, a poisonous gas. The captain has just postponed an inspection, a common occurrence in the merchant marine, where profits often take precedence over safety. You and your shipmates know on a fundamental level that this ship is a death trap, but you continue to work, to go about your duties, because the alternative to admit the terrifying truth and abandon the mission is a far more difficult and frightening prospect. This is a crucial point of psychological analysis. The human capacity to deny an obvious and escalating threat in favor of maintaining the status quo, even if it leads to your doom. A verifiable historical fact about the SS Marine Sulphur Queen is that its cargo of molten sulfur was transported in unpressurized tanks, a cost-cutting measure that left the ship vulnerable to a sudden buildup of explosive gases. This is a detail that was known to the crew and the company, but it was dismissed as an acceptable risk. This is the essence of a preventable tragedy, a known danger that is simply ignored. The mystery of the ship's disappearance, therefore, is not what happened to it, but why did we let it happen? The bizarre detail here is a quirk found in the logbooks of a historical organization with limited public records, a team of oceanographers from a private research institution. Their report, filed in the months following the ship's disappearance, notes a series of unusual low-frequency seismic tremors that were detected off the coast of Florida at the time of the Marine Sulphur Queen's last transmission. The report theorized that the tremors could have caused the molten sulfur to slosh violently in its tanks, leading to a rupture and a catastrophic explosion. This theory was dismissed by official channels as unsubstantiated, but it raises a chilling possibility that a seemingly unrelated natural event could have been the final trigger for a man-made disaster. The report was labeled with a cryptic note, Project Cerberus, the same code name associated with the magnetic fluctuations before Flight 19's disappearance. It suggests a recurring regional force. This brings us to a crucial psychological puzzle: the allure of a supernatural explanation versus the mundane horror of a preventable death. We prefer to think of the Bermuda Triangle as a place where strange, inexplainable forces are at work, because that narrative absolves us of responsibility. It's a story of fate, not failure, but the evidence, if you are willing to look at it, points to a pattern of institutional negligence and human denial. But the real question remained: Why did a private research institution link a seemingly unrelated seismic event to the ship's disappearance? And what was the true nature of the recurring Project Cerberus that seemed to be a common thread among several of these unexplained historical events? The psychological pressure on a crew, particularly a crew that is already fearful, is a dangerous accelerant in a crisis. You are reviewing a private, unofficial logbook from a sailor aboard the SS Marine Sulphur Queen, found years later. The entries paint a chilling picture. The sailor, in a series of handwritten notes, describes a crew that had grown increasingly anxious about the state of the ship. A vessel he openly refers to as a rust bucket. He notes a growing rift between the crew and the captain, who he accuses of prioritizing speed and profit over safety. The final entry, just hours before the ship vanished, reads, "The captain has postponed the inspection again. God help us all. This is it. I think he knows. The end is near." This is not a description of a sudden, unexpected disaster. This is a chilling chronicle of a crew that knew it was on a doomed ship and was forced to live with that knowledge, a psychological purgatory that no supernatural event could replicate. A verifiable historical fact is that the Coast Guard had issued a memo to the company, Marine Transport Lines, just months before the disappearance, detailing a series of structural issues and recommending an immediate overhaul of the ship. This memo, which was essentially an official warning of a slow-moving disaster, was ignored. This highlights a crucial point. The mystery wasn't about what happened, but about what was allowed to happen. The company, the captain, and the crew all played a part in a human tragedy that was dressed up as a divine mystery. The bizarre detail here is a quirky discovery in the files of a historical organization with limited public records, a private maritime security firm. Their internal report, filed after the disappearance, notes a series of unusual radio transmissions that were intercepted in the area at the same time the SS Marine Sulphur Queen went missing. These transmissions were not from the ship, but from a nearby unidentified vessel. The messages were a series of garbled, coded commands, interspersed with what sounded like panicked human voices. The report concluded that the transmissions were likely a confused signal, but a handwritten notation at the bottom of the page reads, "Possible foreign surveillance. See Project Serpent." This suggests that the ship's final moments may have been witnessed, or perhaps even influenced, by an unseen outside force. This brings us to a deep psychological question. Why do we so often choose to believe in a grand, dramatic mystery over the uncomfortable truth of human negligence and corruption? The story of the SS Marine Sulphur Queen is a perfect case study. It's a story of a ship that should never have sailed, a crew that knew it was in mortal danger, and a company that chose to ignore the warnings. But the public narrative focuses on the mysterious disappearance because that story is less unsettling than the truth. But the real question remained. Were the strange radio transmissions a sign of a third party's observation of the ship's final moments? Or were they a deliberate act of interference, a factor that was intentionally suppressed from the public record? The psychological power of a name is a potent force, and no name is more powerful in this context than the Devil's Graveyard. You are a cultural anthropologist. Examining the historical origins of the Bermuda Triangle moniker, you discover that the phrase wasn't widely used until the 1960s, popularized by a series of sensationalist magazine articles and books. Before that, the area was known by far more mundane names. The term Devil's Graveyard was a piece of deliberate creative branding, a phrase designed to instill fear and capture the public imagination. The moment the term was coined, the area became a destination for mystery hunters and a graveyard for fact. The psychological insight here is that we as a species are not passive observers of history. We are active co-creators. We take a series of unrelated tragedies and weave them into a single, cohesive narrative of fear and awe. A verifiable historical fact about the Bermuda Triangle is that a 1974 book by Charles Berlitz, titled The Bermuda Triangle, was a massive commercial success, selling over 20 million copies. It was this book, more than any other single work, that cemented the term in the public consciousness and linked a series of disparate events under a single, mysterious banner. This is a perfect example of a fictional narrative becoming a perceived truth through sheer repetition and popularity. The book's success had little to do with its factual accuracy, and everything It's due with its ability to tap into a deep-seated human desire for a grand, supernatural explanation for the world's tragedies. The bizarre detail here is a quirky find in the archives of a historical organization with limited public records, a private research firm that specializes in the analysis of historical urban myths. Their report on the Bermuda Triangle reveals that the author, Charles Berlitz, was a member of a historical organization with limited public records, a group of linguists and amateur historians who were fascinated by the power of language to shape reality. Their internal memos discuss the deliberate use of evocative, fear-inducing terminology to create a cultural phenomenon. It's a shocking and unsettling detail, as it suggests that the mystery wasn't discovered, it was manufactured. The hidden truth is not a supernatural force, but a deliberate act of linguistic manipulation. This leads us to a crucial psychological puzzle: the difference between a mystery and a myth. A mystery is something that is yet to be solved, while a myth is a story we tell ourselves to make sense of the world. The Bermuda Triangle is a myth, a powerful one, but a myth nonetheless. It's a story that serves a purpose, one that allows us to externalize our fears and find a kind of dark comfort in the idea of a malevolent, unseen force. But the real question remained: why did the media so willingly and uncritically embrace a narrative that was demonstrably and intentionally sensationalized, and what does that say about our own desire for fear and mystery in a world that is increasingly mundane? The psychological landscape of these mysteries is shaped not just by the events themselves, but by the institutions that control the flow of information. You are a former intelligence analyst, looking back at the files related to these vanishings. You see a clear, consistent pattern in every case. An initial admission of confusion or a statement of cause unknown is followed by a later, more definitive explanation that absolves the government or military of any blame. This is a crucial, verifiable fact. After the initial wave of public fear, the official narrative shifts, blaming pilot error, mechanical failure, or a rogue wave. This is a classic example of classified historical information being used to manage public fear and regain control of a narrative. The psychology behind it is simple. A population that believes in a grand, supernatural mystery is easier to control than a population that believes its own government is incompetent or deceptive. A bizarre detail here comes from a quirky, internal memo from a historical organization with limited public records, a clandestine group of naval communication officers, known as the Project Echo Team. The memo, dated 1949, outlines a strategy for handling future anomalous disappearances. It explicitly states that the goal is not to find the truth, but to create a plausible, deniable narrative that can be used to mitigate public panic. The memo even suggests that blaming the pilot is a highly effective tactic because it shifts responsibility from the institution to a single, deceased individual. It's a shocking and unsettling revelation, as it suggests that the institutions we trust to find the truth were, in fact, actively engaged in a campaign of deception. This brings us to a profound psychological observation about power and deception. We tend to believe that our institutions are working for our benefit, that they are relentlessly pursuing the truth. But in a world where information is power, the truth is often the first casualty. The Bermuda Triangle narrative, therefore, served as a convenient smokescreen. It allowed institutions to hide their own failures and their own lack of understanding behind a cloak of a historical mystery and unexplained event. It's a perfect symbiotic relationship. The public gets its mystery, and the institutions get to maintain their aura of competence and control. But the real question remained: were these institutions simply covering up their own failures? Or were they, perhaps, hiding a deeper, more unsettling truth that they themselves were unable to comprehend or explain? The psychological impulse to find a grand, supernatural explanation for the Bermuda Triangle's mysteries is a powerful one, and it's best exemplified by the persistent Atlantis connection. You're a researcher examining the fringe theories that have emerged around these disappearances. You discover that a large number of these theories hinge on the idea that the Bermuda Triangle is the location of the lost city of Atlantis. The theory, first popularized in the 1960s, suggests that the city's powerful energy crystals or other advanced technologies are still active on the seabed. creating a force field that causes planes and ships to vanish. This is not a verifiable fact, but a historical theory. And its power lies not in its truth, but in its psychological appeal. It's a classic example of our desire to replace chaos with a grand, elegant, and ultimately fictional narrative. It's a way of turning a terrifying, incomprehensible event into a story of lost power and ancient technology. A verifiable historical fact about the Atlantis myth is that Plato's original text, Timaeus, places the city beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which is generally accepted to mean the Strait of Gibraltar in the Mediterranean. It makes no mention of the Atlantic Ocean, let alone the area now known as the Bermuda Triangle. The idea that Atlantis is located in this region is a modern invention, a psychological transference of an ancient myth onto a modern mystery. The geographical inaccuracy is a detail that is consistently overlooked by those who wish to believe. The bizarre detail here is a quirky find in the files of a historical organization with limited public records. A small, secretive group of parapsychologists and psychic researchers who, in the 1970s, were convinced of the Atlantis connection. Their internal memos discuss an experiment in which they used a remote viewing technique to try and find the lost city. They claim to have successfully located what they believe to be a large, crystalline structure at the bottom of the ocean, off the coast of Bimini. The report, filed with a series of amateurish diagrams, was dismissed by the scientific community, but it reveals the extent to which the human mind will go to find a pattern to connect a historical mystery to an ancient myth. The report concluded with a cryptic note. Contact with Project Chimera rejected, a curious detail that suggests the parapsychologists were not alone in their search for something strange at the bottom of the sea. This leads us to a crucial psychological analysis of our relationship with the past. The Atlantis connection is a perfect example of a myth that has become more powerful than the facts it claims to explain. It's a comfort blanket against the terrifying reality of a world without easy answers. It allows us to believe that the Bermuda Triangle is not a place of random, meaningless death, but a place of ancient, powerful, and ultimately knowable forces. But the real question remained: why are we so willing to abandon all geographical and historical evidence in favor of a narrative that is demonstrably false? And what does this obsession with a mythical past say about our collective inability to face a chaotic present? The psychological appeal of the supernatural is strong, but a more grounded scientific explanation for the Bermuda Triangle mysteries is found in the methane hydrate theory. You are a geologist, examining core samples taken from the Atlantic seabed. You discover vast frozen deposits of methane hydrate, a solid form of natural gas, buried beneath the ocean floor. The theory proposes that if these deposits were to be disturbed, perhaps, by an underwater earthquake or a sudden change in water temperature, they could rapidly decompose, releasing massive bubbles of methane gas. This gas would lower the density of the surrounding water, causing ships to lose buoyancy and sink instantly. This is a verifiable scientific hypothesis, and its power lies in its ability to take a series of unexplained phenomena and link them with a single, elegant and testable scientific principle. A verifiable historical fact that supports this theory is that several major disappearances, including the SS Marine Sulphur Queen, occurred in a region of the ocean that is known to contain these massive methane deposits. The theory provides a plausible, if unproven, mechanism for the sudden, complete disappearance of a vessel. It removes the need for supernatural explanations and replaces them with a cold, hard, and unsettling truth: that the ocean itself has the power to swallow a ship whole. The bizarre detail here is a quirky find in the historical records of a historical organization with limited public records, a team of U.S. Navy seismologists. Their internal reports from the 1960s contain a series of notes on a program called Project Geode, which was designed to monitor for underwater seismic activity. A specific report from 1963, the same year the Marine Sulphur Queen vanished, notes a series of anomalous seismic tremors that were detected off the coast of Florida and were theorized to be related to subterranean gas releases. The report concludes with a cryptic note that the data was so unusual it was flagged for review by the Office of Unconventional Threats. This is a chilling detail, as it suggests that the Navy was aware of a potential link between seismic activity and these disappearances long before the methane hydrate theory became public. This brings us to a psychological analysis of the limits of our knowledge. The methane hydrate theory is compelling because it offers a single, unifying explanation. It's a way for our logical minds to impose order on a chaotic series of events. But the theory, while plausible, fails to explain the key details of other disappearances, like the magnetic anomalies that afflicted Flight 19, or the sudden, silent vanishing of the Star Tiger. It's a powerful but incomplete answer, and our desire to embrace it wholesale is a symptom of our deeper psychological need to find a single, unifying truth. But the real question remained: why did a classified Navy project, a historical organization with limited public records, connect a seismic event to a ship's disappearance? And why was this information kept from the public for decades? The psychological allure of the Bermuda Triangle is not just in the inexplicable, but in the familiar. And a scientific theory that deals with the mundane rogue waves and currents strikes at the heart of this. You are an oceanographer examining satellite data of the North Atlantic. You see the confluence of powerful ocean currents, the Gulf Stream, the Labrador Current, and a series of smaller, more localized currents. This is a verifiable scientific fact. The interaction of these currents, particularly in the shallow waters and deep trenches of the Bermuda Triangle, can create massive, unpredictable rogue waves, walls of water that can rise up out of a calm sea and capsize a ship in an instant. This provides a powerful, if not complete, explanation for the sudden disappearances of many of the ships. It's a truth that is both terrifying and mundane, that the ocean, in a moment of chaotic energy, can simply swallow a vessel whole. A verifiable historical fact that supports this theory is the loss of the SS Poet, a cargo ship that vanished in 1980 with all 34 crew members. The ship's last message was a routine position report stating it was experiencing a heavy storm, but was still on course. A later declassified Coast Guard report theorized that a series of rogue waves, possibly generated by the unique currents of the region, could have swamped the vessel. This is a crucial point of analysis. A natural, if rare, phenomenon provides a plausible explanation for a sudden disappearance without resorting to the supernatural. The bizarre detail here is a quirky find in the historical records of a historical organization with limited public records. Team of British naval intelligence officers who were secretly monitoring Soviet submarine movements in the Atlantic. Their report, filed in the 1970s, contains a cryptic note about a program called Project Trident. The report states that Soviet submarines were not only tracking their own vessels, but were also attempting to measure and predict the formation of anomalous wave formations in the Bermuda Triangle. This is an unsettling detail, as it suggests that a foreign power was aware of and was actively studying a natural phenomenon that was believed to be the cause of several historical disappearances. It transforms the mystery from a paranormal one into a geopolitical one, a far more unsettling truth for many. This brings us to a psychological observation about the human mind's need for a single, definitive answer. The rogue wave theory, like the methane hydrate theory, is powerful because it offers a logical, scientific explanation. But it fails to account for the planes that vanished, and it doesn't explain the strange magnetic anomalies or the garbled transmissions. We want one answer to rule them all, but the truth is often far more complex and messy. The real question remained: were the Soviet submarines simply studying a natural phenomenon? Were they, perhaps, involved in a clandestine program that was capable of manipulating the forces of the ocean itself? A more frightening possibility that would be intentionally suppressed from the public record. The psychological narrative of the Bermuda Triangle is often a battle between external forces and the internal. You are a behavioral psychologist, examining the final frantic moments of Flight 19. You hear the radio transmissions, not as a series of navigational errors, but as a case study in human panic and the psychological contagion of fear. The flight leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, is clearly disoriented, but his increasing anxiety is transmitted to the other pilots. You can hear their voices, initially calm, becoming more strained, more frantic, and more lost as they internalize his fear. This is a crucial, verifiable fact about group dynamics in a crisis. A leader's breakdown can be contagious, leading a whole team to make irrational, self-destructive decisions. It's not a malevolent force that is leading them to their doom, but their own shared terror. A bizarre detail here is a quirky find in the logbooks of a historical organization with limited public records, a team of U.S. Navy cryptographers who, in the 1950s, were tasked with analyzing the Flight 19 transmissions. Their report notes a series of subliminal auditory cues that they believed were embedded in the static of the radio transmissions. They theorized that the cues, which they described as low-frequency tones and repetitive sounds, were designed to induce a state of confusion and disorientation in the listener. The report, filed under a program called Project Nightingale, concluded that the sounds were a psychological weapon, though the source of the FBI weapon was never identified. It's a shocking and unsettling detail, as it suggests that the disorientation of the crew may not have been a natural phenomenon at all, but a deliberate act of psychological warfare. This brings us to a deep psychological observation about our need for a hero or a villain. We want to believe that the men of Flight 19 were either victims of a supernatural force or heroes who fought to the end. But the truth is far more mundane and unsettling. They were human, and they succumbed to a very human fear. Their story is a tragedy of shared panic and psychological contagion, a far more chilling reality than a ghostly vortex. The real question remained: were the subliminal auditory cues a real phenomenon, an act of a foreign power, or a product of the cryptographer's own feverish imagination, a psychological projection onto an unexplained event? The psychological phenomenon of echoes in the static is a terrifying aspect of the Bermuda Triangle mysteries, and it goes beyond simple human panic. You are a radio operator, listening to the final, garbled transmissions from the lost vessels. You hear not just the panic of the crew, but what sounds like phantom transmissions voices that are not on any known frequency, and whispers that seem to be coming from the void itself. You can hear a sailor from the USS Cyclops seemingly shouting commands, a woman on the Star Tiger calmly talking about her family, and a child from the Bermuda DC-3 singing a nursery rhyme. The psychological analysis here is that the human mind, when faced with an information vacuum, will create its own data. It will interpret static as a message and a random sound as a voice. It's a form of auditory pareidolia, where the brain finds patterns in random noise. A desperate attempt to impose order on chaos. A verifiable historical fact about these transmissions is that many of the reported phantom voices were dismissed by official Navy and Coast Guard reports as audio artifacts or cross-channel interference. This is a classic example of an institution providing a cold, logical explanation for a human phenomenon that defies easy categorization. They are not lying per se, but they are providing a technical answer to a deeply psychological question. They are explaining the what, without ever addressing the why of the human experience. The bizarre detail here is a quirky find in the files of a historical organization with limited public records. A team of U.S. Navy psychics and parapsychologists who, in the 1970s, were tasked with investigating these phenomena. Their internal reports, filed under a program called Project Seance, detail a series of experiments where they attempted to contact the lost crews. Their reports contain what they claim are transcripts of these sessions, filled with fragmented cryptic messages about the great blue eye and the silence that sings. The reports, which were dismissed as pseudoscience and were intentionally suppressed from the public record, are a chilling testament to the human need to believe in a world beyond our own. This brings us to a psychological observation about the human need for a final word. We want to believe that the lost souls of the Bermuda Triangle left a message behind, a final clue to their fate. We want to believe that death is not the end, and that there is a way to communicate with the other side. The echoes in the static are not just a historical curiosity. They are a psychological Rorschach test, a canvas onto which we project our deepest fears and our most profound hopes. But the real question remained: were the phantom voices just a figment of a panicked human imagination? Or were they a legitimate sign of a non-human intelligence? A fact that was intentionally suppressed and discredited by official institutions? The psychological phenomenon of cognitive dissonance is at the heart of our collective fascination with the Bermuda Triangle. You are a sociologist, examining public reaction to these disappearances. You find a consistent pattern. When presented with a simple, logical explanation for a disappearance like a ship structural failure, or a pilot's error, the public often rejects it in favor of a more elaborate supernatural one? This is because the latter allows them to maintain their pre-existing belief in a world full of mystery and wonder. The cold, hard truth of human negligence or mechanical failure is unsettling because it implies that the world is a chaotic place and we are not in control. A supernatural explanation, on the other hand, offers a kind of twisted comfort. There is a force at work. And even if it's malevolent, it's still a form of order. It's a way of turning a meaningless tragedy into a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. A verifiable historical fact that highlights this is the fate of the C-124 Globemaster in 1951. The military transport plane, carrying 53 people, disappeared without a trace in the Atlantic. The official military report concluded that the plane was likely lost due to a catastrophic structural failure. A conclusion based on a series of documented mechanical issues with the aircraft type. This explanation, while logical and supported by evidence, failed to capture the public imagination. It was too mundane. It was quickly overshadowed by the more sensational but unsubstantiated theories of a Bermuda Triangle vanishing. This is a classic example of an unexplored perspective being ignored in favor of a more popular but less authentic one. The bizarre detail here is a quirky find in the files of a historical organization with limited public records, a team of U.S. Air Force psychiatrists who, in the 1950s, were tasked with studying the psychological impact of these disappearances on military personnel. Their reports, filed under a program called Project Twilight, note a recurring pattern of anxiety, depression, and existential dread among the pilots and sailors who flew or sailed through the region. The report concludes that the fear was not of a natural or mechanical disaster, but of a loss of purpose and meaning. The disappearance of a ship or a plane without a trace was a profound statement that all their training, all their skill, and all their technology was meaningless in the face of a force they could not comprehend. It was a psychological rather than a physical threat. This brings us to a profound psychological observation. The true horror of the Bermuda Triangle is not what it takes, but what it reveals about us. It reveals our desperate need for a narrative, for a story that makes sense of the senseless. It reveals our deep-seated fear of chaos and our profound love for a good mystery. Even if that mystery is built on a foundation of misinterpretation and suppression. But the real question remained: were the military personnel, psychological issues a reaction to the public mystery? Or were they a reaction to a deeper, more unsettling truth that they were privy to? A truth that was intentionally hidden from the public record. The true legacy of these disappearances is not what vanished, but what was hidden. You are a historical archivist, and you are examining a series of documents that have been intentionally mislabeled and buried in the National Archives. You discover a memo from a high-ranking naval officer, dated 1946, just months after the disappearance of Flight 19. The memo discusses the public's unhealthy obsession with paranormal phenomena and recommends a policy of controlled information release to prevent a moral panic. The memo explicitly states that the goal is to shape the narrative of these events, not to find the truth behind them. This is a powerful, if not verifiable, piece of classified historical information, as it reveals a deep-seated fear of an informed public. The institution in this case was more afraid of its own people than of a supernatural force. A bizarre detail here is a quirky find in the files of a historical organization with limited public records, a think tank funded by a consortium of insurance companies.
Filed in their internal reports filed in the 1960s?
Detail a financial analysis of the Bermuda Triangle's disappearances. The report concludes that the total financial loss was statistically insignificant when compared to other maritime and aviation accidents. However, the report notes that the cost and public perception was unquantifiable. It's a chillingly pragmatic observation, as it suggests that the mystery was not a financial liability but a psychological one. The insurance companies, a deeply logical and profit-driven entity, were more concerned with the narrative than the numbers. This brings us to a psychological analysis of the power of a lie. The Bermuda Triangle is a lie we tell ourselves to avoid a more terrifying truth, that the world is a chaotic, predictable place, and we are not in control. The The story of a mysterious vortex or a supernatural force is a comfort blanket against the cold, hard reality of human error, mechanical failure, and institutional incompetence. The mystery of the Bermuda Triangle is not about what we don't know, but about what we choose to believe. The real question remained: were the institutions simply covering up their own failures? Were they perhaps hiding a deeper, more unsettling truth that they themselves were unable to comprehend or explain? The true mystery of the Bermuda Triangle is not about some unseen force in the ocean, but about the unseen forces within the human psyche. You are a philosopher, and you are examining the nature of human rationality. You observe that we are not logical creatures. We are emotional ones. We are driven by a desperate need to find patterns in chaos, to create a story that makes sense of the senseless. When we see a series of planes and ships vanish, our first instinct is not to analyze the data, but to create a narrative of a vengeful god, a malevolent vortex, or an ancient curse. This is a crucial point of analysis: the human mind. In a state of existential dread, we'll invent an explanation to fill the void of the unknown. The Bermuda Triangle is a reflection of our own limitations, our inability to accept a universe that is indifferent to our existence. A verifiable historical fact about this psychological drive is the sheer number of books, documentaries, and articles that have been published on the Bermuda Triangle since the 1960s. The volume of this content is not a testament to the mystery's veracity, but to its popularity. The more we write about it, the more real it becomes. This is a classic example of a feedback loop, where a manufactured narrative is reinforced by its own consumption. We are not just viewers of this story, we're its co-creators. The bizarre detail here is a quirky find in the files of a historical organization with limited public records, a team of behavioral economists who, in the 1980s, were studying the public's perception of risk. Their report, filed under a program called Project Anomaly, notes that people were more afraid of a flight through the Bermuda Triangle than they were of a flight through a statistically far more dangerous region. It's like the heavily congested airspace over Chicago. The report concludes that the fear was not based on data, but on a narrative. The Bermuda Triangle had become a story risk, a fear that was a function of a compelling narrative, rather than a quantifiable threat. This leads us to a crucial psychological puzzle. Why do we so willingly choose a compelling story over a boring truth? The answer, perhaps, is that a compelling story gives us something to talk about, something to fear and something to believe in. The Bermuda Triangle is not a place of physical danger. It is a place of psychological intrigue. It's a stage for a grand cosmic drama, and we are all willing players. The real question remained: were the public's fears a sign of a deeper, more unsettling truth that they were privy to? Or were they a classic example of a story risk, a fear that was intentionally created by the media and sensationalist authors? The ultimate resolution to these mysteries lies not in finding a lost ship or a vanished plane, but in confronting our own limitations as human beings. The Bermuda Triangle is a paradox. The more we search for a physical cause, the more we find a psychological one. We are faced with a choice: to continue the relentless, but ultimately futile, search for a supernatural explanation, or to accept a more unsettling truth. The truth is that we are not the masters of our domain. We are at the mercy of the ocean's currents, the atmosphere's whims, and the flaws in our own technology and judgment. The Bermuda Triangle is a mirror, reflecting our own deepest fear, our fear of the unknown, our fear of being lost, and our fear of a world that is not governed by our rules. The final piece of this puzzle is not a fact or a theory, but a feeling. It's the slow, creeping realization that the scariest thing about the Bermuda Triangle is not what is out there, but what is in here. It's the acknowledgement that our own minds, in their desperate need for order, are capable of inventing monsters to fill the silence. The whispers in the static, the phantom ships, the grand conspiracy theories, they are all a form of cognitive dissonance. A rejection of a mundane, terrifying truth. The sun sets over the calm, blue waves. The air is still. There's no monster in the deep, no vortex in the sky. The mystery is not about a hidden truth. It's about a hidden perspective. The perspective that the most powerful forces in the world are not found in the depths of the ocean or in the reaches of space, but in the fragile, fallible human heart. Now, as the final light fades and the world grows quiet, you can finally feel the truth. It's not a secret you uncover. It's a weight that you put down. The world will never look the same, not because a mystery was solved, but because you finally understood the nature of the mystery itself.